Yo, like me, you may have been hopeful for um a Mythic Plus like system revamp in the War Within. Um I won't say I was like holding out for it. But I was more hopeful um that we would see more meaningful changes than what we have. And if you haven't seen like an hour ago or so, um, they announced their plan for the War Within, these dungeon changes, with regard to affixes. So I think we'll like look at these first, I guess. Um, Basically, they say that their overarching goal is to minimize the mechanical overlap between affixes and dungeon trash design in the current +4 affix bucket. I assume this is mainly targeting afflicted and incorporeal because those, um, like, I guess not the CC one, more the. I guess they're both right because they can happen like during boss mechanics, afflicted where you need your dispel for like another mechanic, and then incorporeal just like during a mechanic. It's kind of like weird if you have to cast a move or something like that. Um, Entangling, I guess, feels restrictive with classes that can't remove it themselves, so you'd have to like walk out of it during a boss mechanic that you wouldn't want to. Storming and volcanic are just like annoying, um, but generally like the easier ones. Like there's some mechanics where storming is like bad, um, but generally not very impactful. So I assume they're mainly talking about the first three for that. Um, so that's their overarching goal with the +4 bracket. And then they also want these three following objectives to be satisfied. So shift the source of the challenge to the dungeon itself. So okay, so instead of some other weird shit like ad spawning, they're enhancing the creature abilities themselves. Reduce visual noise, nameplate clutter in the cognitive load on players during trash combat. Okay. Allow for varied and context specific gameplay decisions depending on the dungeon they are applied to. Okay. I mean, those three things will make sense once we read the affixes. Um, Additionally, these affixes will include a positive effect. The aim of these effects is to highlight different damage types each week, allowing each specialization additional opportunities to excel during the season. So, um, these effects should feel like a bonus, offering an advantage for different damage profiles each week without being essential to complete a dungeon. That's like a cooked idea in the first place, but uh, it's the second one. Players have an opportunity to flex their different talents, gearing options, and consumables to capitalize on those effects. Will be interesting if this actually affects like gearing options, like if a trinket does like arcane damage, whether that will be affected on that week. But I assume it will, since they say like consumables and gearing options that like trinkets and pots that do like these specific types of damage or something like that would work in that way. All right, so basically we have four affixes here. They all make the players do more damage to them. Uh, and they're split into 10% increased arcane damage. Um, so this one's reckless. So the mob's armor is reduced by 30%, and they take 10% increased arcane damage. Thorned, they take 10% more holy and shadow damage. Attuned, the mobs take 10% increased nature damage and 30% increased damage from bleed effects. And then focused, 10% increased fire and frost damage. Okay, and then the negative effects are the non-boss enemies without mana ignore 20% of armor with their attacks. And this is all non-boss enemies. The second one is a thorn-based reflect, so whenever you attack them, they reflect or not reflect, but inflict physical damage to the attacker. This could be a problem with like stuff that like calculates the tick rate wrong, like if there's no like inherent DR, and some abilities like count as dealing like a lot of damage in a short amount of time. Like a lot of instances, they might just like murder themselves. Um, I can almost promise you we'll see that happen. Um, this one just causes non-boss enemies with mana do 20% more magic damage, and then non-boss enemies with mana have 30% increased haste. That's awesome. Okay, so these four affixes are replacing the season 4 affix bucket, and then they are removing um, all affixes from the +7 affix bucket except raging, bolstering, bursting, and sanguine. Um, so that's my first problem, is that like looking at these lists, right? Like these four and then these four. Um, every week you're gonna have raging, bolstering, bursting, or sanguine. Um, I like never want to play this affix. I never want to play this affix. So half the weeks are ones I don't want to play. Um, I feel like that's bad. And then a lot of these affect mostly the tank, which is weird. So non-boss enemies without mana ignore 20% of armor. This negative is only for the tank. Non-boss enemies with mana have 30% increased haste. So this means that stuff that just AFK casts on your tank that you don't have the kicks to usually like interrupt is gonna blast. It's gonna be harder to hit those casts with AoE stops. It's just weird. Non-boss enemies with mana inflict 20% increased magic damage. Again, on the casts that are just like if you like always target the tank. Anything that isn't like just on the tank, like you're going to need to kick and stop. So this is kind of like irrelevant anyway, because like any non-boss enemy cast that does a significant amount of magic damage, you're already stopping. Um, so yeah, so that's weird. Um, and then non-boss enemies without mana inflict physical damage to their attackers when attacked. Another like I just feel like people are gonna get global by the game like calculating their reflect incorrectly. But like the best case for this is what like healer has to heal more, um like more like by 20% throughout the key, like on trash where they normally wouldn't have to heal and they could like DPS or something like that. That's like that's not like interesting, right? Or am I wrong? And then the second half of these affixes is like some specs do like significantly more damage, right? Like so maybe you'll take like a paladin when it's 10% increased holy damage week, and then a shadow priest when it's 10% increased shadow week. Um, and then they say it's like, oh well, don't worry. Like these numbers should never be like the difference between timing a key and not. But if you're doing a like if you're doing like the highest level of key or like near the highest level of key, um, or even if you're like doing the highest level of key for you, right? Like, do you think the WoW community is going to be like, I'm going to take the Feral Druid on 10% increased arcane damage week when I could bring an arcane mage? Um, or like, how do you envision like this is going to play out? I don't know. That's kind of like my idea is like, I think you're mostly going to um, I feel like most people are going to take the like free quote unquote damage they get um, when accessible. Um, so, But let's talk about like the like wider problem with affixes, right? So like the new affixes aren't fun. Um, they like primarily affect your tank, and healer. Um, which is like those are the people getting the most affected by. These are the people that already have to do the most within the key. When it comes to like dealing with affixes or dungeon design and stuff like that. So it's like even makes them feel like even worse, right? Um, and it's just like the complaint forever has been like, well, what is this affix even doing in my key, right? Like, is it interesting how I have to play around it, um, or do I just feel like meaninglessly punished for playing the game? Like there's just like, oh, this timer for this timer for the dungeon would be like 39 minutes, right? But with Sanguine, it is 43. Or not, it would be go the other direction. It's 35, right? Wahoo. Um, so like that's really unfun. And it makes it like really hard to justify logging in on weeks where you know it's just arbitrarily harder um for no reason. And like I said earlier, like the 4+7 affixes like bolstering and sanguine are really like not fun. Um, especially on fortified. So that's like half the weeks that I don't really want to log in for. Um, I mean, we have a week coming up already. It's like, what is it, Incorporeal um, Sanguine next week or something? Let's see. Fortified Incorporeal Sanguine, yeah. So it's like, I don't know. I feel like you should be able to log in and have fun whenever. And the whole like idea of affixes like makes that like not a real thing. Um, and it just like it leaves you end up feeling frustrating. And like this idea I've had for a while is like, okay, well, why does this dynamic where time like the affixes like take away time from your key, um, like arbitrarily? Why is that like the dynamic of affixes? Why are they all negative? Um, when like they've shown that they can conceptualize the idea of kiss curse, right? Um, what is so uh like why can't they like at least try like this concept in like a way that's fun? Um, like thundering was definitely not fun because it was like too invasive and it had such a severe punishment for failing, right? Um, and and from my perspective, it's like, is there any real problem with having just a kiss affix? Um, that like makes the dungeon more fun to play, right? Like, um, or more fun, more interesting, like more engaging. Um, is there a version of Kiss Curse that is actually fun, right? Because like I would be much more incentivized to log into or like walk into a dungeon where um like the things that I had to deal with felt like fun and interesting and not just like annoying and like arbitrary. So that's kind of like my idea, I guess. This is what I've always wanted. Um, but you have like a fundamental problem with um, like week 1 is better than week 2. and whatever, right? With like the current system where it's like, if you look at this, um, like why would I ever play Fortified Incorporeal Sanguine when I can play um, Fortified Storming Bursting, right? Like even yeah, like Fortified Storming Bursting. Why am I logging in on um, Tyrannical Incorporeal Spiteful, and I can log in on Tyrannical Entangling Bursting, right? Why am I logging in? It's just so much more unfun to play the bad affixes that it's like, I mean, and you can see this if you ever like have queued up like a 17 or like a 19 or 19, 20 or whatever, um, on a bad week, and it's like there's no one signing up, yeah, no one's playing the game, and you can probably see it from the leaderboards as well, like the number of world first keys done on bad weeks, like once the season has gotten rolling, the title changes on those weeks. I would imagine it's fairly exemplary of people really not wanting to play, right? And is that something that could be like assuaged with the idea of like a kiss curse affix and like a kiss or like a kiss only affix? I mean, I think it could, um, because I feel like psychologically it's much more like, even if the kiss, like you have like one, two, three, four kiss affixes, right? Like even if four is like very powerful, right? Like the dungeon is like much easier on four. Um, let's say like 50% easier. Like if one is 35% easier, right? And this is like the variance. Like you can still log in and get shit done on the 35%. And it feels much better, I think, because you're not being held back by the affix being annoying. You're being held back by like the tuning of the affixes not being as similar, right? Um, and you can probably outplay this to a much higher degree, um, and while feeling much better about it than their current system. But that's just my idea, I guess. Obviously not happening. Um, but yeah, pretty like super dissatisfied by the changes actually. Anyway, moving on to like the dungeon design itself, I guess, which is like graveyards and checkpoints. What else? Mob mob ability density. Hmm. Yeah, I guess that's it. So one of the really annoying things that they've done since I think BFA is these like horrible, horrible graveyard and checkpoint updating that they like claim to be like RP related. Like it's supposed to be like flavorful, like as you level and do the dungeons on like normal and heroic or whatever. Um, but it's just not fun. It's horrible. Like you wipe in Brackenhide anytime after the first boss and use TP back to the entrance. Like, bro, it's it's like 3 miles until to get back to where you were. Um, Past like 900 mobs that you skip because they're really annoying. They're badly tuned, right? Like, um, so like this has just been a thing like forever, at least since BFA, where it's just so unfun, and I don't really get like the reasoning for it. Like why is it so bad that the graveyard would update after a boss? Um, like I just don't really get why it wouldn't. Like the halls of ascension, like why didn't the graveyard update like better there? I don't know. There's so many examples of like, oh, like why is it like this? Um, and so that's like just consistently fun. Um, the same main problem is just like the mob ability density. It's just there's so many mobs have so many abilities, and when you have them just scaling in like logarithmically like this, right, or exponentially, um, like everything they do is just gonna be like death, right? Um, and it makes you really need to have this like very high quality yeah, make these very high quality levels of stops, right? Like where you stop like every ability, right? um that is like super scaled because of the content. um and if you don't do it, then like your tank probably dies or your team dies, um and then your dungeon's over, because you didn't have like the perfect coordination of stops and interrupts. And that's where it gets like really frustrating, is where you have like this like set of mobs that need to be like stopped, and like this set of mobs that needs to be like that needs like full kick rotation, right? um so it's like if any of these ever go off, then you wipe or your tank dies, and if any of these ever go off, then you wipe or your tank dies. And like that's really tough and annoying. And like the I feel like the thing that they consistently don't understand is like the fun part of Mythic Plus is pulling big, right? Like it's been a meme for a while where like we watch like the MDI or the TGP and we see a big pull and we're like, oh, whoa there, like I would never do that on live. Like, yeah, but you would love to, right? Like every DPS in the world wants to pull massive and do big damn, right? Like that is fun, and Blizzard has been gatekeeping us from the ability to do that for so long. First with target capping. What the fuck is this, man? What is a target cap? Why is that real? Like every DPS in the game wants to pull big, do big damn. So um like the whole idea of target caps in the first place was just really dumb, um, and like antithetical to how like your player base wants to play the game. Um, the second is like the tank wants to do that too, right? Like the tank wants to feel powerful. They want to do a big pull. They want to blast, stay alive, like through their own agency, right? But tanks usually aren't like powerful enough to do that. In these past two seasons, they have been, right. Like like the examples of being like Guardian Druid and Vengeance Demon Hunter in seasons 2, 3, and 4, um, respectively. Uh, they're just all they like they can pull a pack, like a massive pack, and live, right, pretty much by themselves, and that feels awesome. Um, it feels awesome when you have to interact with the mobility density less because of the current Vengeance Demon Hunter kit, and even to be honest, even if even it like you still need to do so many AoE CCs, even when DHs can lock out the mobs for like I think it's about this, right? So like with one silent sigil that is like a pressing roar, I think it's like 9 or 10 seconds, and then the second one is like 6, right? So you had like let's call it a 15-second lockout, and then the DH gets like 3 free stops from the rest of their kit, right? So call it something like 15 seconds of both, right? So 15 seconds of stop, 15 seconds of kick in your lockout. Like even with that, like your team still has to use all their buttons to stop like other casts. There is just that many, um, and that feels bad. So yeah, and then consistently throughout um every dungeon, mobs are just tuned like with a high delta, right? Um, like in a lot of places, like Braconite is a really good example, right? Because you have the first area, you have the second area, the trees, um, you have the third boss, and then you have like the fourth boss area, right? And I'll call this one the boss, right? So if you can, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So like the first area, you really want to minimize the amount of trash you pull. What people do is they do a big pack with lust, right? They skip right to the boss, and then after the caster boss is dead, they pull in another pack of trash, right? Because that's efficient. But outside of that, all the other trash in that area is skipped. Why? Because it's fucked and annoying. Um, in the second area, you have these. The only reason why the second area's mobs are preferred is because you can completely ignore the dangerous mechanic. So the trees spawn little plants, right? Little plants, and the plants like murder you with these bleeds that do infinite damage after they stack a couple times, right? Like the first stack is okay. After that, really starts to hurt. Like really starts to hurt. So what you do is you just get on a no path available like little pole with evoker or some such. Or you find one of the other like infinite safe spots, like basically anywhere where you can get no path available, and then the guys don't jump on you, and it makes the trash super free, right? Um, so that's one example of like the mob tuning just being like really bad and like forcing you to pull the dungeon a certain way. Same thing with the war spears in not good first area. These mobs are just unfair. Like I don't know who thought of this mechanic or who put the scaling on it or whatever, but the way you currently deal with these mobs is you never take any war spear bleeds at all, by standing up on a pole, right, and having the furthest available target be inaccessible to the war spears, right? So you just delete that mechanic, right? And without being able to do that, it just feels like impossible at a certain level, right? So that's completely up to their own dungeon design. They can change this whenever they want, right? Any of these they could just change like on demand. They can put new graveyards in very easily. They can they can put less mob abilities in and think more about the purpose of each ability, right? And how you're actually going to pull the dungeon in real world content, and what that looks like. And then mob tuning, like we do Mythic Plus testing, like we report like this is easily seen like what is unbalanced, right? um and that's the kind of the bringing all these points together, right? Is it's just like intentional and competency, right? Like they have been receiving this feedback forever, right? Mythic Plus is not fun. If it is fun, it's because my class is fun. If it is fun, it's by accident, basically, right? Like these dungeons are now in like a mostly playable state after having been slowly fixed for the entire expansion, and that fix has been like allowing the war spear poles to just exist, right? Like allowing the Brackenhide um like pet no path ability to just exist, right? or any of the other like actual fixes and adjustments that they've made that have made the dungeons like more playable than the other states. Um, the affixes is like, since the introduction of the affix system, every time they make an update, it's like, okay, well, you guys are playing the game wrong, but we hear you, so we'll make this small change that aligns with our design philosophies, and we'll see how that goes, right? Because we know better, right? And it's just like, since since forever it's been this way, right? Like, okay, well, it's so you guys don't like explosive, right? Well, I have a new idea about what could make explosive good for you guys, so I'm going to try that, right? And it's like, no, we like the core idea behind explosive is bad. Like, stop, please, get help. Like, no. And it's just like every time we're like, we cannot stand this. Like, this is horrible. I do not want to log in. I do not enjoy playing the game when it is bolstering, when it is explosive, when it is necrotic, right? And it's like, okay, but like, have you tried it in this way that's like slightly less worse? And it's like, no, man. Like, the whole idea is what is the problem, right? Like, even if it was easy, I wouldn't like it because it's annoying, right? And it's, I feel like it's this this core concept that they fail to understand. It's like, I don't want to do the dungeon and just be constantly annoyed, right? Like, every time I get knocked up by a storming, I feel like infinite fury within my soul. Whenever I need to cancel a void torrent cast because, or I get a void torrent cast cancels because a volcanic spawns under me, I feel like infinite rage, and it's just not fun, right? So like, in my opinion, like, fun should be the goal, right? Like, Mythic Plus at its core should be like, this is a challenge that you're like opting into, right? Why does so much of the annoyance and the friction need to come from these like fake artificial sources which aren't part of the dungeon, right? And they touch on that idea with the new affixes where it's like, okay, well, what if the negative side of this affix is the actual mob being worse, right? But you already have that basic idea in the game as fortified and tyrannical. We don't need it to do 10% more physical damage or magic damage or cast 10% faster. That's not interesting. It just punishes your tank or healer, right? And that's not fun. And I don't know how consistently they fail to iterate on their own game in a direction that makes it more fun. And that's like where we just constantly are. After every like set of Mythic Plus changes, it's like, okay, but did you make it more fun? And the answer is no. So here we are. And then finally, we have this, like, I don't know if they like actually do this, but like, it feels like they justify not making sweeping changes or not being creative about their Mythic Plus design and evolving it, like, since Legion, which has been like forever ago now, right? Like, when did Legion release? August 2016. Okay, so it has been 8 years since Legion, and Mythic Plus has like just not basically changed since then, except to get worse in all of these respects and not get better in all of the affix respects. Like, despite like some of the like bad affixes being removed, I still feel like we're in essentially the same place. It's like, okay, yeah, a necrotic doesn't exist, but I still have this annoying affix that I don't, that makes me not want to log in. So I feel like conceptually we're just in the exact same place as we used to be, plus all these negatives that have like came out of their development of Mythic Plus since then. And like I was saying, like, the player base is forced to participate in the content, right? Like, if you want to fill your vault, you're going to be doing a key, right? Like, if you want to gear your character, you're going to be doing keys. Um, So I feel like the participation is like pretty much always high, um, because you are forced to do the content to progress your character. Um, and I feel like that has made them not feel the pressure to evolve the system since then. And yeah, so that's my rant. I don't know. Nothing's gonna change. So maybe we can connect and feel annoyed about it through this video, but that's all. Yeah. Peace.